Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be looking back in the life of David. We're going to be looking in 1 Kings chapter 1. David's an old man. In the passage we're looking at, he's actually going to pass away in the first two chapters of 1 Kings. But we're specifically going to be looking at the account of Adonijah, his son. Now, our hymn is called Approach My Soul, the Mercy Seat.
Approach my soul, the mercy seat where Jesus enters rare. There humbly fall before his feet, for none can perish there. Thy promise is my only plea. With this I venture nigh. Thou holdest burdened soul to thee. On such, O Lord, am I. O wondrous love to bleed and die, to bear the cross of shame, that guilty sinners such as I might plead thy gracious name.
Let's look at our passage now. 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 1. David's old. He's advanced in years. They put covers on, but he can't get warm. And so a certain young woman is sought for him to keep him warm. Verse 2. And that individual is going to show up again later on. But David's son, and David hasn't passed away yet, he's still alive. But Adonijah, David's son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king, and he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and all these things. And I think David knew it, and David had not rebuked him, there in verse 6. And you might notice he also was very good looking. His mother had borne him after Absalom. So we see who he's related to. So he confers with Joab, that would be David's general, and with Abiathar the priest, and they followed and helped Adonijah. And that wasn't too wise on their part. And so, anyway, if you're familiar with the account, we're leaving out a few of the details. But Nathan sees what's going on. Nathan the prophet sees what's going on and says to Bathsheba, do you know what's going on? Because Bathsheba's son is Solomon, and Solomon is the one who's supposed to be king. And so Nathan says, does David realize what Adonijah's done as far as proclaiming himself to be king? And so Bathsheba goes in and speaks to David and says to him, verse 17, My lord, you swore by the Lord our God, saying, Assuredly Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne. But look, Adonijah's become king, and now my lord the king, you do not know about it. And so the king rises. And so King David answered and said, Call Bathsheba to me. She'd gone out, all these things. And the king says, Call Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. They came before the king, and Solomon is going to be proclaimed king. And so that's verse 39. So all the people went up after him, and the people played flutes and rejoiced with great joy. There's much merriment. Now Adonijah and all the guests who were with him heard it as they finished eating, and Joab heard the sound of the horn, and he said, Why is the city in such a noisy uproar? And in comes an individual, and Adonijah says, Come in, you're a prominent man, bring us some good news. And the fellow says, Nope, not good news. David's made Solomon king. So Solomon sits on the throne now. And all the guests, verse 49, who were with Adonijah were afraid, and arose, and each one went his way. Now Adonijah, he was afraid of Solomon, so he arose and went and took hold of the horns of the altar. And it was told Solomon, saying, Indeed, Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon, for look, he has taken hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear to me today that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. Then Solomon said, If he prove himself a worthy man, not one hair of him shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. So King Solomon sent them to bring him down from the altar, and he came and fell down before King Solomon. And Solomon said to him, Go to your house. Couple things about that passage before we look at another one right after this. I understand the altar was a place of refuge, but it is not a lucky rabbit's foot. It is not, it's not a lucky charm. It's not a totem. Okay, and so Adonijah should understand that, needed to understand that. And so back to our hymn, when we approach the mercy seat, what we're really talking about is we're approaching Jesus. We're not talking about an inanimate object. We're talking about Jesus. We're talking about a person. See, Israel ran into this before. Do you remember in Samuel's life when the Lord says, I'm going to do something, and the ark's going to be taken, and that's the thing. There Eli's sons were, and there Israel was, and they thought they could just trot out the Ark of the Covenant and everything would be good. They were treating it like a lucky charm. That's what they were treating it like. It's like, oh, bring out our lucky rabbit's foot. It's like, no, that's not how this works. And so back to our passage, he grabs hold of the horns of the altar, and Solomon says, if he proves himself a worthy man, he'll live. But if wickedness is found in him, he'll die. And so it was up to Adonijah to conduct himself in a worthy manner. It's like, you can grab the horns of the altar all day long. That ain't going to save you. Like, no, if you're wicked, you're going to be dealt with. And so you better watch your P's and Q's, Adonijah. You're on thin ice. Well, guess what? Adonijah doesn't watch his P's and Q's. And so in chapter 2, you have David's instructions for Solomon before he passes. And then you have his passing. Then Solomon's reign is established. So once David's gone, old Adonijah, or young Adonijah, comes along to Bathsheba. And remember, Bathsheba's not his mother. Bathsheba's the queen mother. Right? Bathsheba's Solomon's mother. And she says, do you come peaceably? And he says, peaceably. And he says, I have something to say to you. And she says, say it. He says, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. You might want to be careful what you say there, Adonijah, because he was a little presumptuous in what he did. He says, now I ask one petition of you, do not deny me. And she said to him, say it. And then he said, please speak to King Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag, the Shunammite, his wife. And that was the young lady who was given to David. Bathsheba, I'm not really sure why Bathsheba didn't tell him to go away. But Bathsheba says, okay, I'll talk to the king for you. And Bathsheba talks to Solomon. And Solomon says, why do you ask for this? And then Solomon says, kill him. He's done. Effectively, to paraphrase it, Adonijah has spoken this word against his own life. And so, verse 25, Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down and he died. So the altar, don't treat it like something that it's not. Like you have to walk in a worthy manner. And if you have an opportunity to speak to the king, and if you have an opportunity to ask for just one thing, what should you ask for? What should you ask for from the king? I assure you it's not what Adonijah asked for. Probably should be something along the lines of, God, please be merciful to me, a sinner. And you ask for the Lord's mercy. If you're going to ask for one thing, ask for that. Adonijah, selfish to the end, didn't he? Might think about it. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.